Okay, let's see if this is working again. Hello, everybody. Trying to get this. See, look, it popped right back up again. There we go. It's popping right back up. Hey, everybody. Hey, everyone. Hopefully this will work this time. So let's get everyone back on. We're back. Sorry, y'all. As you know, with so many people on live, these platforms tend to be a little overwhelmed. There's going to be some glitches. So let's see if we can get her back on. Here we go. I think we got it. But again, hello, Senator Warren.
Hello, Alex. How are you?
I'm well, Elizabeth.
Good.
How are things going in your end?
They're going good. How about at your end?
They're going all right. Obviously, this is such a hard and challenging time for all of us, and I'm so sorry. We've seen the loss in your family. We have a lot of losses in our community, and it just goes to show that this is really impacting all of us on a very, very real level. And I'm so honored to be able to work with you and making sure that we are guaranteeing people's rights in this time, because as we know, COVID-19 is not just a public health crisis, it's an economic crisis.
Yes, it is.
And both of those things facilitate each other.
Right. So I think of this as I'm able to shelter at home. Bruce and Bailey and I are here together. I assume that you're able to shelter at home, but think about all the people who are out there working to make that possible. And so we talk about essential workers, and everybody immediately thinks of doctors and nurses and all the folks in the hospitals. And of course, they're right. But there are so many more essential workers than that. So who do you think of, Alex, when we talk about essential workers?
Oh, man, I mean, they're right here in our community here in the Bronx and Queens. We of course have nurses and hospital workers, but we have our delivery workers, our grocery store clerks. And one that gets really overlooked here in our community, it's home health aides.
Yes.
The folks that go and in person to take care of our parents and our grandparents and our friends. A lot of those folks don't get the same protections that hospital workers do, and they are paid hourly wages. Oftentimes they do not have access to paid sick leave. Warehouse workers, the folks that are making sure that our supply chains are intact. These people are so vulnerable. Farm workers, the people who are actually preparing our food to make sure that we can pick them up at the grocery store. These are some of our most vulnerable people in the country.
Right. And people in transportation, people who are driving buses, people who are delivering through Uber or Lyft or any other service. These are folks who are getting out there and making it possible to slow down the spread of this virus because they're out there on the front lines. But here's the problem. It's just like you said, for a lot of them, they were already in economic trouble long before this crisis started. Think about it. You were talking about home health care workers. Many of them have no union representation. They're hourly workers. If the hours aren't there, then they don't survive. A lot of them are paid low wages. And so I think about, here they are, the ones who are keeping this economy going. They're the ones who are keeping us fed. They're the ones who are making sure that we're still able to have a functioning country and a functioning healthcare system in the middle of a crisis. And yet, think about the jobs they have. What kind of protection do they have? How do you see this, Alex?
I think it's, again, like what we've seen in coronavirus is that it's not necessarily a crisis that is bringing all these new issues to the country. What it's done is that it's accelerated and it has intensified all of the existing inequities that we have. There's no reason why these workers and why all workers don't have the ability to just go to the doctor and not worry about if their family's going to be bankrupt from it. And if anything, we're calling them essential workers now. These people have always been essential workers. Our economy has always depended on grocery clerks. They've always depended on home health care aides. And we, those of us that are privileged enough to be able to stay inside and, not be scared about the rent coming up in May, our lives have always depended on workers such as these. And this moment is just highlighting it for all of us.
So let's talk about these essential workers, because we've put together an essential workers bill of rights. And I know you're part of this. Let's talk about what's in there. And it is, as you say, we're focused right now on the essential workers who are back at work, but there's going to be a bigger issue down the line. So let's start right now with essential workers. What are the things that you think they most need right now?
Well, we know paid sick leave.
Paid sick leave. I mean, come on, we're in a healthcare crisis. Can we talk paid sick leave? If you're going to have to get out there, you can't shelter at home. Don't you think at the least you ought to have paid sick leave? Yeah, it seems only fair. And besides, it's a public health issue. I talk to folks who work on these hourly jobs, and they say, I have to go to work even if I feel sick, because it's the only way I can put food on the table and cover my rent. So paid sick leave, very important to them, individually important for all of us. Okay, keep going.
Hazard pay.
Hazard pay, come on. If they're not going to get to stay home to try to keep themselves safe the way that everyone else is doing, I think it's time they get some hazard pay. We're doing bailouts for giant corporations. Hello, could we put a little money in to say that the folks who are keeping this country running day by day by day get some hazard pay? Okay, I'm in on this one, Alex. What else?
Amen. Healthcare.
Yes, healthcare. Healthcare for everyone, but in particular, again, we're in a healthcare emergency, and they should know that if they need healthcare, if their children need healthcare, if they're out there exposing themselves and potentially exposing their families, by golly, the rest of us ought to be covering healthcare costs. What else you got?
Absolutely. And here's a big one, childcare.
Yes. So I've been thinking about the childcare issue a lot. We hear from nurses, we hear from healthcare providers who say, I know you need me, but my childcare center has closed down. My babysitter has gotten sick or can't come over. She's sheltering.
Public schools.
Yes. So they can't function if they don't have childcare. So I want to tell you how I've been thinking about this. When Speaker Pelosi said, what was it, maybe a month ago, that one of the things we ought to be thinking about when we're doing really trying to rebuild and do the stimulus, not just hold off the immediate crisis, but trying to rebuild as we come out of this crisis. We need to put money into infrastructure. And I know most people think of roads and bridges. Some people think of mass transit. Very 21st century folks think of broadband. I think of childcare.
Absolutely.
You can't go to work. You can't have a functioning economy if you don't have childcare. You're just cutting all the parents out and reducing productivity in the country, if you want to put this in economic terms. So again, in very personal terms and in economic terms, childcare critically.
Yeah, and it's such an important point that you're making, because infrastructure is not just physical, it is also the social structures that we have that allow us to live our lives. And you can't drive to work on, even if you have the infrastructure of a road, if you don't have the infrastructure of childcare and you have a newborn at home. And housing, I think, is another huge area of that. I know in the state and in other areas we're pushing on that as well, because without our workers being able to feel like they are able to survive and be able, that they won't be evicted or foreclosed on or have a balloon payment after a forbearance, they won't be able to do it and step up and do everything that they need to do. And so all of this, I think, is incredibly important. And and that is why it's so critical for us to make sure that we rally around an essential workers bill of rights. I don't know if there's any other parts in it that you'd be interested in highlighting, but it's so important.
there's also the part about protecting the rights of people to join unions and
Mm-hmm.
protecting collective bargaining agreements if they're already parts of unions. I think a lot of folks in this moment are starting to look around and say, I really need someone on my side. And
Mm-hmm.
that means a union. So I'm really glad to see our unions active, out there advocating on behalf of working people as they've done forever. But part of the Essential Workers Bill of Rights is to say union representation. If people want union representation, that has to be a guaranteed right that they can get to.
Absolutely.
That's what makes change over time, when you've still got
Mm-hmm.
someone, as we come out of this, fighting on your side. So we put all this together in the Essential Workers, and you notice we called it Bill of Rights. We didn't call it the Essential Workers, things we're doing out of the goodness of our heart, things that maybe we'll give them for a little while. We really wanted to frame this as this is the minimum. This is the
Mm-hmm.
basics on which people who are out there doing the work to keep this country going should be treated with dignity and respect. And this is a core part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what can people do? Let's talk for a sec. You and I are very grateful for all that essential workers are doing. And we're putting out this Essential Workers Bill of Rights. What do we want to ask people to do to help make this happen?
Yeah, well, I think the first things that we need to do is make sure that all of your representatives are co-sponsored and signed on. And I think sometimes the mistake that we make, or just one of the things that we do sometimes at home, is that we say, oh, well, you know, my representative is a Democrat, I'm sure everything is fine. And
Yeah.
when it comes to labor protections, when it comes to worker protections, you have to make sure that every I is dotted and that every T is crossed. And it's important to look it up and see if you're represented. You can just go to house.gov or senate.gov to look up, who is co-sponsored on our bills, and to make sure that we push to make it a priority. And I think also what it takes is it's gonna take a lot of guts, because a lot of times the way that I think deal making happens in Washington is a lot of times folks we can't stomach the fight. It's like, do we really need a fight right now?
Mm-hmm.
And the tipping point for so many members of Congress is really feeling like their constituents are paying attention to this
Yes.
and want them to fight for it. And
Right.
if you call up your office, Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. If you call up your office and say, this is important to me, it allows members to go back and to say, you know what, my community wants me to fight for this, so I'm going to fight for it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right on that. It's to get energy, to get momentum, to get people to get in the fight. In Washington, you got to have people in the fight back home who are truly part of this. And one way to do this is exactly as you said: call, text, write, email to your person in Congress, and also to both of your senators. And I don't care,
Absolutely.
Democrat, Republican, Independent, reach out, because the more they hear that this matters to folks, the more likely they are, when the bill comes by, when they see it, when they hear about it, say, hey, I want to be part of that too. Or when the negotiations come up, to say, I'm in on this, count on me on this. And that really matters. And that's why we're doing a day of action today. And we've been asking people, stand with essential workers, to use that hashtag stand with essential workers. Tweet about it, talk about it, text about it, right? But let people know that this issue matters to you. And I always ask this part, for everyone who is an essential worker, tell your story. Get out there and talk about it. Talk about what it's like when you can't get childcare. Talk about what it's like to be a home health care worker, when you're so concerned about making sure that you're taking care of yourself so you don't give something to someone else, but also that you don't get something. What it means to be a worker that has a very challenging job, even in the best of times, but in the middle of a pandemic, and they truly are providing a lifeline. Write about that. And people can go to elizabethwarren.com and go to your site, post it. Let us do this. Let us amplify these stories. And if you have a story of gratitude, tell that story too. Somebody who's helped you, somebody you know about, somebody who is an essential worker, who's getting out there and doing this work, lift them up. Now's the time. Because these are folks who've had our backs forever. And it's time for us to have their backs too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much, Senator, for joining us. And I know we're going to hop over and do another bit of rallying as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Make sure that you tweet. Tell your story if you're an essential worker. It's so important. And if if you're not one, make sure that you also share your story of gratitude for all of our essential workers as well. And let's fight, because the best way that we can thank essential workers is making sure that they are paid a living wage, have health care, and have all the labor protections that they need and deserve. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Alex, for doing this.
Thank you.
Stand with
Bye-bye.
essential workers. Bye-bye.
Bye.